win up to £25,000. The Community Lottery, a subscription-based lottery that allows you to continue to support good causes that matter. When you win, good causes win. Every month, eligible good causes have the opportunity to win a share of funds that could help them continue the good work that they do in our communities. To apply, there's no complicated forms, nor do you have to be a registered charity. Just grab your phone, send us a 60-second video explaining your good cause and the difference having extra funding would make to your project. Visit thecommunitylottery.com. Hit the play button and sign up for either 13 weekly draws or by direct debit for just £4.35 that gives you 4 weekly draws. You could have the chance of winning £25,000. The aim of the Community Lottery is to create an additional source of funding that will enable good causes to undertake innovative projects that matter. If you're in, the communities win.
Net Live TV with What a Week with myself, Mr. C, and of course my wonderful co-host Tony Crossbody, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey, good evening everyone. Good evening, Mr. C. What are you saying, brother?
Good evening to you, Tony. Good evening each and all. I'm good, my bruv. I'm really, really good, man. I'm really good. You're looking well, Tony, man. You're looking well.
Oh, man. You gotta try in this. You gotta try during this corona, man. You gotta put some effort in, you know.
Yeah, man. I can see that, man. You're looking very sophisticated this evening, sir. You're looking very. It seems like you're having an inspection.
Well, we've got some sophisticated chat to talk about tonight, so
we sure do, man. We sure do. Yeah. We sure do. So listen, thank you very much for all of the viewers who are watching us from near and afar. We welcome your company, but most importantly, please remember to like, subscribe, and to share, so we can keep you updated with what's ever happening with What a Week. So, oh, look at this. This is what we love to see, Tony. Look at the love and the blessings coming in straight away.
You know, it's like the IKEA sale at New Year's.
It sure is. It sure is. And Tegan Allison says, blessings, Mr. C and TCB. You guys are looking cool tonight. See, look, Tony, you even get nicknamed TCB, you know.
What you saying?
I'm sure TCB is what my mum used to give me when I was ill.
I'm the cure for the sickness. This is a cough of happiness, ladies and gentlemen. It's not COVID. It's not COVID. Greetings to everybody, man. Oh my days! What a week! What a week! What a week! Of course, ladies and gentlemen, we're seeing again unprecedented security over in Washington as regards to what's happening with the inauguration of President-elect Biden. We're not going to even cover any of that news this week, ladies and gentlemen. We've got more important things to talk about. We will cover that next week. So, Tony, how has your week been so far? Oh, Pierre, Jackie, woo, Alfredo. Hey, Joanna, how you doing, cuz? Angela, hello, Angela. Everybody's coming through the door. They're coming through the door.
TCP
Pierre says that's my first time on here. Well, let's hope it won't be your last.
Who's that? Pierre. Oh, well, yeah. Welcome, sir. Welcome.
Welcome.
Don't worry. Do not let all of the ladies intimidate you, sir. We welcome more gentlemen on this platform.
Oh, we need more gentlemen. Too many ladies on this show, man.
Angela, Rudolph, thank you very much.
Rudolph has turned up, man. As we said that, greetings, bro.
Greetings, Rudolph. Angela, thank you very much. It was a very interesting Instagram live, man. It was a good little interview. I do believe it'll be available on YouTube. We spoke about some real good things on that Instagram live. Brother Courtney Winston. So thank you for that. So yeah, as I was saying, sorry, Tony, your week. How's your week been, sir?
You know what?
Since I saw you.
The week has flown so quickly. I'm just surprised it's come round to Tuesday again. Do you know what I mean? It seemed like it was only a couple of days ago that we were on this show, and then before you know it, it's the weekend, and then we're back here again. So, what have I been doing? Well, not too much of anything, to be honest with you. I'm just pleased that particularly today it's a lot warmer than it has been over the last few days.
I find that once the rain starts to come, the temperature starts to rise. So yeah. But I mean, I haven't ventured out much myself, so I stay within my four walls. And try and focus on what I need to do and what needs to be done. Is right. Me just whatless, basically. just lounging. Not really.
You know what sort of really surprised me though? In the last sort of 7 days, I find myself sadly having to give condolences to different people who've lost someone. And it's almost like saying condolences to you and the family has become like a cliche that, you know, we're all saying to people who are grieving at this point. And I must admit, you know, it is quite shocking that although the people aren't directly related to me necessarily, but you know them or you know someone who knows them, and it kind of brings that very close to home. I don't know what your experience has been on that, but that's how it felt.
Well, definitely. I mean, I've got to be honest and say that that's one of the reasons why I don't spend so much time on Facebook now, because I found myself being caught between the two emotions. One, I found myself spending like 45 minutes to 50 minutes just telling people happy birthday. And it came to the point where I had to stop and think to myself that if I didn't have Facebook, a lot of these people, I wouldn't know that it was their birthdays, and I wouldn't be sending them birthday greetings. So do I have 45 minutes, 50 minutes every day to be telling people, even though, you know, these are your so-called friends, Facebook friends, but how many of them are your real bona fide friends? So I've tried to cut that down and keep that even tighter. But again, on the other emotion, the other side of the emotion is the condolences, as you said, man. It seems like every day there's somebody who passes away. And, you know, it takes you back to your youth when you think to yourself, before you had mobile phones and everything, you wouldn't know if Jackie in Croydon's mum had passed away until you saw Jackie. And that might have been a year or 2 years later You say, oh, Jackie, how you doing? I ain't seen you for a while, man. Time, blah, blah, blah. How's your mum? Oh, my mum sadly passed away 2 years ago. By this time, Jackie's been able to deal with the grief and everything, and she's in a good place to have that conversation with you. Whereas now with Facebook, you're having to deal with it in real time. And it can be very, 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 it can be very saddening. And you know, and as we talk about this, I mean, this weekend and this last week, we've seen 2 comedians bury the parents. Quincy, Richard Blackwood, buried his mother. Quincy buried his father. And just as you thought, well, such a sad moment has passed, I found out that my godmother had passed away. And my days, man, on the 18th of January, both yourself and me, Tony, were greeted with the sad news of our dear beloved friend and an absolute icon within our industry, of course, Michael Rennie.
Oh,
where was you when you heard the news, man?
I was in bed, man, and I heard the notifications go from my phone, and something just told me to sort of just look at it, you know, and I picked it up and saw the news that he had passed. And you know, you don't want to hear that news at any time of the day. But first thing in the morning, it kind of shocks you out of your sleep. You know, like nah, like this is unbelievable. Yeah. And then you go around making the phone calls to confirm that this is not, you know, a false story, that it is true. And you know what they say, how you start your day tends to be how the day continues. Yes, very much so. Very much so. And that definitely was the case yesterday, because much like yourself, I was in bed. I had very much of a late night the night before, so I'd probably hit the pillow around about 4 o'clock in the morning, I think, or minutes before. And you know, one of the things what I started doing now, Tony, is that I switch off all data and Wi-Fi and everything off my phone when I go to sleep now. So the only thing what can wake me is either my children, because their phone numbers bypass the do not disturb, and my alarm. And it was on a day, yesterday's a day where I don't have to get up early, I don't have to do anything, so I had no alarm. When I got up, I saw that I had around about 4 or 5 missed calls. Couple from people that I know, but I'm not expecting to get a phone call from that kind of person, from those kind of people at that time of the morning. And I'm thinking, huh? Why are you phoning me this time of the morning? So at first I was very dismissive. What are you phoning me this time of the morning for? Then I saw a few numbers that I didn't even recognize, and I was like, this is weird. I just kind of, again, I just brushed it off. Like to think, you know what, if you never left a message, I'm not getting back to you, so sure. And then I went into my WhatsApp, and I could just saw that there was a lot more activity than per normal that morning in certain groups as well. And then I saw a personal message from a dear loved one and the first thing they said was, you know, oh my gosh, C, I'm so sorry to hear the sad news. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh my God, don't tell me. And then I saw Mikey RMP, RIP, and I've never got out of my bed that quick in all my life. I can tell you that from now. I shot up. I was so disturbed by the news. And because I knew it was from a loved one, somebody who I trust, I couldn't even go and do that verification thing, because I knew that this was the truth, that this person would not send me this kind of news unless it was the truth. And bruv, I found myself in the next 5 minutes in the kitchen washing dishes, because I was just in a state of, I could not believe it. And tears was just flooding from my eyes. I couldn't believe it, man. A big loss, a big shock. Shoe Doctor again says, rest in eternal peace, Mikey RMP. Yeah, man. So for those viewers who are probably not aware of Mikey or Michael Rennie, he is certainly a pillar in the Caribbean community. He has been in and around the music industry for over 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
For over 30 years, has been one of the mainstays of the Caribbean Weekender, alongside his partners, Richie and Philip. And, you know, people have sort of said one of the things that really stood out about him was that he proved that you could bring large numbers of black people together. The numbers were some up. I remember someone mentioned that when they first started that, only 20 people were attending, and then it's sort of upwards of 2,000 plus, and there was never any trouble. It was properly organized. I mean, can you imagine, see what it'd be like to be responsible for organizing an event for 2,000 black people?
Listen, my brother, and I think what we've got to say as well is that when this event first started as well, that it transcended into being the Caribbean Family Weekender, where what you was having was that people were bringing their children along as well, and it was just, for me, it was the closest to being how we should be living. I thought, the first time I went to the Caribbean Weekender, I couldn't believe the numbers that I saw. I couldn't believe that people were there with their families, children, and I said, this is a village where I should be living in all the time, not for just one weekend of the year. And I was hooked from the very first time I went there. I first went as a punter. Then many years later on, I went as a fan. And then as somebody who wanted to be able to perform on that platform, on the cabaret show on the Saturday. And for like 2-3 years, I waited in the wings, waiting for my turn, and then to finally perform on that platform in front of an audience of like 1,000 plus 2,000 people on a Saturday night show. And, you know, I've got to be honest, that level of audience and that platform that Mikey, Richie and Philip gave me the confidence to go and perform anywhere in the world in front of any number of people. Because once you perform in front of 2,000 hardcore African Caribbean ravers and you can entertain them, you can entertain anybody.
Absolutely.
You can entertain anybody. So he comes from a history of music as well. His family, his elder brother, Cecil. Who is he, Tony?
He's the owner of King Tubby Sound, one of the great sounds out of London town, from Brixton. So
it's like music is intrinsic in this family. It's absolutely in their DNA. You know, and for years I used to take it for granted that I used to see King Tubby's as being the set that they used. Never knew until yesterday the family connection.
Yes,
that him and King Tubby were brothers.
Indeed, and then he set up along with I believe it was DJ Jigs, the MJR Roadshow.
Yeah, 100%.
And I want to shout them out. Shout out the crew. Shout out to Mouse and all the guys there, because they must be really going through it now. Because,
Darren as well. Yeah.
Man, because those guys were really mentored.
Brownie Rockers.
Mentored, yeah, they were mentored. Respect to Brownie, man.
Yeah.
They were mentored by Mike.
And they're not just friends to Mikey. That is what you class as family. You know, from day one, from the very first one, Brownie Rockers was there. Listen. So his family, his children, his beloved partner, his nearest and dearest, man. We feel your pain, we feel your sorrow. We offer you our condolences. He will be, he will be missed, man. He definitely will be missed.
We would like to invite all the viewers. Perhaps you can sort of put in a comment of a memory you have of Mikey, if you've interacted with him personally or with any of his events. Let us know what your impression was.
Carolyn says he used to leave the Marlborough Cricket Club Sunday afternoon in the early 90s after wicked dances. Or she used to leave the Marlborough Cricket Club Sunday afternoon in the early 90s after some wicked dances. 100%. The Weekenders, bringing the community together.
You know the thing, Mr. C, I mean, you just mentioned that whole point about, getting put on at at the Weekender, putting you on the stage in front of 1,000 people. And that's what Mikey was like. He's like, you know what? All right, you got a talent. Let's see. You know what I mean? He doesn't brush you off. He wants to see what you can do, and he gives you that chance.
Yeah.
And if you impress and he likes you, you know, you have a chance of being on his team. If you perform well, and then before you know it, you know, you're part of that squad. And that's what I used to sort of like about him, that you know, he was always open to you know, new talent coming through, and always encouraging talent.
100%, and I'm a testimony of that, because it's got to be 14 to 16 years ago I first did my first gig at the R&P Caribbean Weekender, and 14, 16 years later I'm still there every year, and that's a testimony to the loyalty of these guys. And even though, you know, for a lot of the journey I didn't deal directly with Mikey, but because I'll be honest, the first 4 years of me going to the Caribbean Weekender, my subconscious thought was, Mikey doesn't like me because Mikey doesn't talk to me. I see Mikey just give me the eyes, and that you know, the eyes and the little nod.
Right. But that's how Mikey moved. Mikey,
I didn't know this. This man don't talk to me. All he does is give me the nod and the eyes.
Right. That's it. And what Mikey does, you see, he assigns someone to look after you and make sure everything is all right, so you can do your job.
Yeah.
He won't interact with you directly. He will just stand back in the corner and be one of the punters and watch you perform.
Yeah.
And then based upon your performance, things either move forward or they don't. And that's the great thing about him. He's hands-on, but then he steps back.
Yeah. You know what as well is what I realized in the end was that if Mikey didn't like me, I wouldn't be there.
Yeah, exactly.
You understand?
Exactly.
And it wasn't until later on that I started hearing comments from other people, because one thing what Mikey would do is, if Mikey liked what you was doing, or Mikey appreciated what you was doing, he would tell people about it. He might not tell you directly, but he would tell people about it. He would definitely do that. And I've got to say, man, tears don't come easy to me. You have to be somebody great for tears to fall out of my face for you. And I'm telling you straight, I bawled yesterday for Mikey. Along with many other people. You know.
Can you imagine what it's like? I mean, the thing is, when you've built up a body of work that he has, right? Invariably, he is responsible for new families within the Black community that were created out of his events. People met at his events, married, had children, right? Started a new generation because of him.
Yeah, listen, many children were born because of some of his events, mate. Trust me.
Of course.
Not saying any of mine. Mine were planned before the R&P Weekender. Yeah, it was planned before. I'm just letting you know, planned before. But however, oh man, you know, like, I got to think that, you know, there's so many steps to his legacy. There's so many branches and ripples. You know, again, so many artists have graced that stage at the Caribbean Weekender. So, as you said, so many families, so many people have come together and become friends, and almost friends have now become family because of the Weekender and the many other events what he's done. But my brother, I can say that I've been to lots and lots of dances and lots of events. But the very first event that's always in my calendar was always the Caribbean Weekender. Always. It's the one and only event that I looked forward to every single year, and nothing could ever take its place at all, man. I've turned down some big work for the Caribbean Weekender because I just have to be there. You know, the Mikeyville. Let's talk about Mikeyville, man. Jeez. You know, we all long for the good old days where we could have that blue dance again, the blues dance again. You know, we could have if we could reminisce and get that same feeling what we got when we used to go Cubies, All Nations, you know, Dougie's, so many other clubs I just can't remember off the top of my head now. But when we was at Great Yarmouth first and foremost, and we had Mikeyville, that room, Man.
And what do you expect from a man who comes from sound system royalty, from, you know, music royalty? He has so many different friends in the music business. He puts people on in the music business. I mean, an individual like that, he was destined effectively to have this legacy. It couldn't have really gone any other way. And like I pointed out before, alongside Richie and Philip, who've been there, steadfast in keeping this going for us so that we had something to look forward to. You know, people were booking Caribbean Weekenders the year before.
The year before. And we had that great time. We're talking around about 5-7 years back, where we left the Caribbean Weekender on the Monday morning, and by the Tuesday afternoon next year was sold out. 3,500 people sold out in one day, with no social media, no advertising, just by word of mouth and repeat customers. Which business does that?
No. And a lot of that is due down to the team and Mikey's sort of people person skills.
Yeah.
You always felt with him that he was for the people. I never got the impression that he was doing it for his own benefit.
No.
You know what I mean? Not. That's what always sort of stuck. And then when he then started the Portugal trips, you know, Jamaica. That was another you know, that was another wonderful experience for those who went there. And again, well organized, no problem. And remember, you know, you're dealing with organizing black people now, who can be, when they're on their day, the most moany, whingiest people.
Hey, if you say you're gonna give us 2 patty and chips, we're expecting the 2 patty and chips. You know, don't give us 2 chips and no patty, you know, because we will let you know about yourself. Come on.
Right. Find a little bit of dust on the thing on your. No, let's complain. Let me complain. But yet, the way he sort of handled them and handled the business of his business, I mean, is a legacy that will stay with him. And I think, Mr. C, you know the problem sometimes with great people, right? They never get their respect and their flowers
whilst they're here.
Until they pass away.
So
I mean,
definitely.
I mean, I'm very sure that Mikey felt the love of the people that basically, you know, went to his events and, you know, supported him. But we never get our flowers until we're gone. And maybe the takeaway from this is that if you've got great people in your life who've been there for you and supported you, don't wait until they're gone.
I echo that, Tony, man. I echo that. I said it earlier on today on my radio show that, you know what, please, if you're in the same vicinity as somebody that you are supposed to show have some emotion called love for, then let them know now while you're alive. Children, if your children are not living in the same house as you, or they're grown, if they're small, hug that child, call that child, and let that child know exactly how you feel about them now, while you've got it in you. Do not take today for granted, because tomorrow ain't promised to anybody, man. Carolyn says, not only was he the consummate professional, when last year's was cancelled due to COVID, refunds came swiftly. And that's about honor, that is. That's about not trying to keep the money in the pocket or in the bank account to try and use it as a leverage to do the things that you want. It's about the respect for the people and to hand them back their money as quickly as you got it. Yeah, absolute, man. Consummate professional.
And he was able to put a good team together to be able to facilitate that, wasn't it? He had a great admin team, some great reps. You know, he really knew how to put, you know, between the three of them, really knew how to put the team together to run this out, because it's obviously, it's bigger than one man, it's bigger than 3 men.
Yeah.
And it's a whole team, and then you've got to vet this team that you want. You've got to vet your reps. What type of people do you want running your coaches? And to do that, so that an enterprise can run successfully takes a lot.
Oh, listen, and the thing is, what we've got to realize, they're not just organizing a trip from people from one part of London. We're talking about all over London, all over the UK, London, Manchester, Birmingham, sometimes Leeds, Gloucester, Bristol. You know, these are just some of the places. Luton, some of the places where they had coaches coming from. Sometimes 2-3 coaches from one location. And just running everything very, very smoothly. And as you said, you know what? One of the biggest things what I learned from Mikey and the team is that the trust that they had in each other in delegating responsibility and roles to people and allowing them to deal with that responsibility. Absolutely fantastic.
Oh, you know, I mean, we're not going to hear the end of the tributes for this great man. And we do encourage our viewers throughout the show to let us know your memories and events that you went to while, you know, Mikey was organizing them alongside Richie, alongside Philip. If you went to Portugal, let us know what trips did you do that Mikey organized. And feel free to comment about that throughout the show. But we do have a few other things we want to talk about, and we'll get back to Mikey as and when throughout the show.
Sure will. We want to say as well, good evening to Carol McDermott. Big up my cousin Philip. Love you. Thank you very much, Carol. Our condolences to yourselves and the rest of the family. Nadine Anderson says, Mikeyville, nothing like it. Big up yourself, Nads. Jen says, evening all. I was late to the weekender. Attended in 2018, my one and only one. Jen, where have you been? Have you just been released from prison? Your one and only weekender? Jen. Who was you in a long distance relationship with? R. Kelly? Well, we're glad that you managed to experience it, Jen. And don't worry, there'll be others. The next time we get together for our R&P event, it's going to be an absolutely memorable one. There will be, I think, for the first time, there will be some serious raving and bawling of tears and rejoicing and celebrating the life of Michael Rennie in one particular dance. So we look forward to that moment. But what I've got to say is that I spoke with one of his business colleagues yesterday, Philip Lumsden. And Philip, he was the person who actually took me out of my state of mind of grief and sorrow. And he literally said, well, you know, Mikey wouldn't want us to be down and feeling saddened and everything. Mikey would want us to live it up, man. Mikey would want us to be celebrating his life and his legacy, the things that we've done. And again, I've got to say that, you know what, those of us who met him, who knew him, who went to his events, who had the pleasure of being in his establishment along with Richie and Philip, we were the lucky ones. For those who didn't get to meet this man, you missed out, man. You missed out. But as Tony says, we'll move things on. The same day, Tony, the 18th of January is a special day as it commemorates the 40th year anniversary. We're going way back to 1981, where on 439 New Cross Road, an atrocity happened which shook the black community in a way that it's never been shook before. Tony?
Well, perhaps we can play this video to sort of give us the basis of the narrative, and then we'll talk about it.
In 22 racist murders were recorded, including Michael Ferreira, a youth of 19, who whilst walking home with friends in Hackney, London, was knifed to death by racists. Few of these murderers and attackers were ever caught by the police, who refused to see the vicious attacks on black people as being racial. Here in what was once the home of a black family, racists were responsible for a fire which engulfed this house during a birthday party on January the 18th in New Cross, London, an area that has a history of attacks on premises occupied by black people. This time, 13 young black people lost their lives and 26 more physically and mentally maimed. The 13 dead, whose names we shall never forget, are Humphrey Brown, age 13, Patricia Johnson, age 15, Lloyd Hall, age 21, Andrew Gooding, age 14, Yvonne Ruddock, age 16, whose birthday party it was, Patrick Cummings, 15, Lillian Henry, 16, Peter Campbell, 18, Owen Thompson, 16, Glenn Powell, 16, Steve Collins, 17, Jerry Francis, also 17, and the second Ruddock to die on that night, Paul, age 22, brother of Yvonne Ruddock. The police theories about the fire have been unconvincing and, as usual, were backed up by the British media. They treated the massacre as a minor fire incident, supporting the police story that there is no racist connection. No one has been arrested for this crime. But for the families who have lost their sons and daughters, and those whose children are still suffering, it's a personal tragedy. One of them, who lost her home, a daughter, and a son, is Mrs. Amza Ruddock.
My concern over the children who lost their lives, it was unnecessary. Every time I close my eyes, I can only see the fire. It was terrible. The fire was really terrible. And the children were screaming, and they stopped screaming. And when they stopped screaming, I said, oh God, they're dead, they're dead. It was so peaceful, really peaceful. I was extremely happy. I've never seen Yvonne so happy in my life at her birthday party. She was extremely happy.
Dead and nothing said. Don't you know it could happen to you? 13 dead and nothing said. Oh, what we gonna do? 13 dead and nothing said. Oh, what this world is coming to. 13 dead and nothing said. Oh, what we gonna do? Mothers and fathers are crying, crying and holding their hands. Been that road in Uganda, been that road in Uganda.
On the bird done come this morning, when the dead in Christ shall rise. I'm just going to read a short passage of scripture to you. Taken from the book of
Lord, this can't be destiny.
The black community reacted instantly to the massacre of the youth. Public meetings were organized, out of which the New Cross Massacre Action Committee was formed. A fact-finding committee was also set up, as well as a fund for the families of the 13 dead. Out of these meetings, a National Black People's Day of Action was called and organized for Monday, March 2nd. Despite pouring rain, thousands of black people turned up from all parts of Britain for the start of this protest and solidarity march. The march had been planned and organized on a nationwide basis under the leadership of black political organizations who had come together under the banner of the New Cross Massacre Action Committee.
People have them life in the fire. Now that's where the fire, they are big disaster. Coming like the evil side fire.
During the period leading up to the march, black people of all ages raised over £19,000 for the families of the 13 dead. The money collected included over £50 donated by black prisoners in Wormwood Scrubs. The march itself took place on a working day, when black workers, students, and school children would come out and join other black people for this National Day of Action, marching over 8 hours from New Cross through to the centre of London, bringing the city to a standstill. The effect of this march forced the political head of state, Margaret Thatcher, to blunder into sending a letter of condolence to the parents of the dead. It was not addressed to the parents, but to a local community worker with an MBE. And to add insult to injury, it was 2 months late. The march demonstrated the unity that can exist amongst black people.
It only goes to show that if we put ourselves together, we could do something. And in spite of all the rain and everything, it's great.
Oh boy.
So I do believe, Tony, is that the Blood of Goran?
I believe so, yes. Yeah, that Menelik Shabazz.
Menelik Shabazz. So that was a film made by the 26-year-old Menelik Shabazz, who at the time had been living in the UK for around about 20 years. He came over here from Barbados. He was a filmmaker, and he was inspired to make a documentary as regards to what happened in New Cross on that day of the 19th of January 1981. Tony, we're going back 40 years, my brother.
I'm old enough to remember that quite vividly, to be honest. We had heard about that literally the day after the event.
Yeah.
And it had been, I would say, for example, from my early experience, from what I can recall, I would say from about 77 till this event, there had been numerous stabbings and bottlings of black people. I mean, I know it's going on before that time, but from my recollection. So when this happened, this was like pretty much icing on the cake of, you know, this whole oppression, murder, and we got, sadly, got used to cases being either half investigated or not investigated at all. And the sort of, when you look back at the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, I mean, you see a lot of similarities between that and the way this particular case was looked into. And to believe that 40 years later, we still don't have an arrest. And it's as if we're supposed to forget about that and move on.
Well, I mean, again, like the event happened in 1981, and again, the verdict was they didn't think there was any malpractice. They didn't think there was any wrongdoing. They didn't think it was any it wasn't a racially motivated attack. It wasn't until the second inquest, which took place in 2004. So the occurrence was 1981, the second inquest was 2004, and that was only then they probably accepted the fact that it was probably started deliberately, but yet again they're denying that it was a racist attack. It was saying the fire was started by an armchair near the television, for example, but it beggars the belief that something as simple as a normal fire could have caused such devastation in a house where, you know, if there was like one person or two person in a room upstairs by themselves, you can probably say, well, that could have been the case, but the house obviously was occupied by quite a lot of people. So if there was a fire by an armchair or by a television, people would have seen it, people would have reacted to it, people would have done the appropriate thing to have outed the fire, surely. This had to be some kind of incendiary device which has escalated the fire in such a way that it was uncontrollable, you know, impossible for any of those within the house to do anything to quench the flames, and therefore leading to the tragedy which is, you know, still here haunting us 40 years later on.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding of that case, and I mean from numerous people who knew or related to some of those people who passed away, that there was an incendiary device thrown through the window. Right.
Okay. We've heard the stories of, yeah, it was probably a petrol bomb thrown through the window.
Right. And again, I mean, this is not uncommon in that era. So the idea that the authorities would say, well, some furniture were burning, I mean, nah, that's not the way. I mean, you know, why did black people en masse decide now to protest about it? Not just about the investigation, but they knew what the cause was. But the fact of the matter is, you know, they felt and still do that whole situation was a cover-up.
Well, again, I mean, I read in The Guardian that there's local, how can I put it, there's local history that supports the theory that the fire was actually started by a racist attack, because 10 years before, in 1971, a house party, Caribbean house party, was attacked by a firebomb in Sutherland Road, which is not too far away in Forest Hill. So again, that left around about 22 people who were injured in that particular attack. And again, 3 years just before that, in 1978, Deptford's Albany Empire Community Theatre was burnt down, with the National Front claiming responsibility. So here we see a pattern of racist attacks using fire. So therefore, this seems to be, you know, the way how they operate back in those days. Yeah. Carolyn says, growing up, I was led to believe this was a racist crime, but some accounts heard over the past weeks says a community knew who it was. So what is going on, people? This could have been any one of my four brothers. Oh, fortunately, it wasn't Carolyn. But again, I'm not to hear this particular theory, what you're saying, Carolyn. I haven't heard anything. So again, if anybody's heard reports again, backing up what Carolyn's saying, that apparently the community knew who it was, please share those thoughts and ideals with us. Please do not mention anybody's names. I don't want anybody being tried by social media. If you've heard any names, then please send those names to the police so that they can further their investigations. I really don't want a witch hunt by social media, especially on this platform here. But again, if you've heard anything, then please give us some details without using anybody's names at all.
Can you imagine, Mr. C? I mean, that was in 1981. Can you imagine what the previous generations went through? Goodness me, 1960s and the 50s and the 40s.
Well, yeah, I've heard some stories. I've heard some stories from my father, stepfather, uncles, and older family members who've said exactly what they went through. Especially like I'm in Northwest London, so especially what happened in Ladbroke Grove, I'm very much aware of the bullying, the racist attacks, the name calling, you know, the spitting, the whole shameful episode of racism back in the 60s and 70s.
So, you know, is this case ever going to be solved? Well, what does the track record suggest?
Only time will tell. I mean, I think what a lot of people haven't really spoken about is the trauma of what the survivors must have gone through as well. You know, we spoke about the mother in this documentary, but again, there was other young people who attended that party who had escaped. You know, some by jumping through the windows, because reports have told us that the stairwell had collapsed, so they were trapped at the upper floor. And so what had happened was some of the young people had jumped from the first and the second story windows in order to escape the fire, and suffered horrendous injuries because of it. Oh man, you know, fire is probably one of my worst fears, Tony. I'd have to say that, you know, I'm probably one of those people who would jump through a window rather than endure being burnt.
For real. For real. So Barbara Powell says, I remember the morning my dad got the call. I was 12 years old. I never got the chance to meet my own cousin, and I never forgot my dad's face.
Yeah, Barbara, man, my heart goes out to you and your father and your family.
So sad. So
yeah,
sad.
Carolyn asked the question, do they want to solve it?
Carolyn says there was a pregnant lady there too.
In the Huffington Post, a young Wayne Hayes, who was 17 at the time, recalled the carnage in an interview. He described how dozens of teenagers and young people trapped upstairs in the house were resorted to jumping out the second floor window. He said it was how hot it was that people's skin was peeling back, and how in the aftermath he had 140 skin grafts. He shattered 163 bones and it's been classified as disabled ever since. So 13 young people were killed and more than 50 people were injured. And one guest, rest in peace, Anthony Burbick, he died 2 years later at the age of 20. And many believe that he took his own life at the result of the trauma that he experienced that night. We want to say that these 13 young people, 14 young people, and all the other people who attended that party, we shall never forget the trauma that they went through. Hopefully, we shall still try and see if we can find any clues, any kind of testimonies where we can find out the real truth of what happened that night, and hopefully bring those responsible, or that person responsible, regardless of what color they may be, to justice. And may justice be found for those souls, and may they rest peacefully forevermore. A New Cross fire, 13 dead and nothing said. We shall remember them long, long, long forever in our hearts. So Tony, we're coming up to the time where we move over into the Black history side of things. I know that you've been mentoring a young person, many young people. I do believe we was going to try and get a young person on this evening. I know we was experiencing technical difficulties. Have we managed to solve those technical difficulties? Will the young Joseph be joining us, or?
Unfortunately not. Difficult. It's too difficult for us to conduct an interview. So we'll reschedule that for another occasion. And I've got quite a few quite a few bits to get through in the Black history in any case, so we can deal with that.
Okay, so just leading into that, so again, there was Eddie Nesta did on his No Joke, he did a very much in-depth report on the 13 dead, the New Cross fire. So if anybody wants to pick up on that, it's Eddie Nesta, No Jokes. You'll find that on YouTube. But again, as we like to do on What a Week, ladies and gentlemen, we like to finish with knowledge of ourselves, of our past, of our history, and most importantly, where are we going? So this is where we hand over to Tony Crossbody to take us into the Black History Studies section of What a Week. Please give him a round of applause.
So, continuing with our journey of Black history, just want to remind you, for those of you who are here for the first time or have not seen much of the show, we are charting the history of those who were involved in the transatlantic slave trade and their descendants, dealing with their identity specifically. So actually that allows us to look at where they're going. So once you understand the history, you can understand the present, and you can actually chart a future. So to that end, let's have the first slide. So here is a book that's held in the UNESCO library. So UNESCO being United Nations organization, this is a very interesting book talking about what Europeans saw when they traveled throughout Africa. So it's boots on the ground. So this is not hearsay. This is first-hand accounts of what was seen. Next slide. Mr. C, would you just read the underline, please?
Africans also settled along parts of the Malabar coast during the 17th and 18th centuries. These were Black Jews, descendants of African slaves.
Thank you. Could you read that last sentence one more time?
So during the 17th and 18th centuries, these were Black Jews, descendants of African slaves.
Right. So remember, this is a book written by Europeans who traveled throughout Africa, and as they do, they study the peoples that they meet, and then they write about them. Here they say explicitly that they met Black Jews. Not only Black Jews, but Jews who were related to those who were slaves or enslaved. Next slide. Here we have a travel journal from the 1850s. Very much the same thing, boots on the ground, people who actually traveled throughout Africa and who met the people there.
Sorry, Tony, to interrupt you. I just want to say that last slide, what part of the world was they talking about where they saw these Black Jews, these African descendants of slaves? What part of the world were they talking about when they saw these people?
So they were talking about on the African continent itself.
Right. Okay. So that's where Malabar is, the African coast. Just
Yes,
wanted our
yeah.
viewers to know and
Right,
understand.
okay.
Thank you.
Next slide. Next slide, please. So this is a travel journal, right, from the 1800s. Again, European explorers going to Africa, writing up a report on who they find and what they see. Next slide. So I'll read that. So if you start at the top, it says, a Jew, right, who had accompanied a German traveler as far as Timbuktu, that's in the area of Mali in Africa. Notice it says, found near the boundary of Bambara a large number of Jewish Negroes. Jewish Negroes. And then it goes on to say nearly every family among them possesses the law of Moses, as Jews do, written upon parchment. So Jewish Negroes are what they found. Next slide. Here is another very ancient book from the 1800s. Again, very similarly, pointing out the appearance of people that they met. Next slide. So if you look at that on the second sentence, it says, talking about Jews now, this is what the subject is about. It says, though they are separate from the African population, they are black and resemble the other Negroes in every respect as to physical character. So what is this saying? This is saying that the Europeans, when they traveled throughout Africa, met a separate group of black people who were living amongst Africans that were Jews. Next slide. Here is a map of Africa, and the arrows that you're looking at come from one part northeast of Africa, which is what today known as the Middle East, but is Israel. And these arrows point out the migration of these people. So they came out of Israel, top right-hand corner, traveled down through Yemen, through Africa. Many of them are in Zimbabwe today, South Africa, and the rest traveled across Saharan Africa into the West. Now, what happened to them there? Next slide. So here's an article discussing the Jewish diaspora in Angola. Could you read that for Mr. C, please?
It's a hard one. It says, I think it's the recorded history of the Jews in Angola.
Don't worry, I'll get it. Don't worry. I got it here. So it says the recorded history of Jews in Angola.
Thank you. I can see it. Stretches from the Middle Ages to modern times. From the, got to go up a little bit for me, please, management. From the 1500s, Jewish settlers moved to Angola due to persecution in Portugal. So I'll read that one more time. The recorded history of the Jews in Angola stretches from the Middle Ages to modern times. From the 1500s, Jewish settlers moved to Angola due to persecution in Portugal.
Right. So we have a diaspora moving into Africa, right? I believe, right? We have a diaspora moving into Africa, and then they move into Angola. Now, you'll remember a few weeks ago, we talked a lot about the Catholic Inquisition and how the Jews who were forced to convert to Catholicism, those that did not, fled into Africa. They fled into Africa. And so by fleeing into Africa, they went into what this is discussing, which is Angola. That's their history. So let me just point, sorry, Nikki, yes, you're absolutely right. I made a mistake. That Calabar is India. And those of you who watched the videos previously will remember we discussed the Indian Ocean slave trade, where the Jews were taken from East Africa by Muslims into India. Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for reminding me. Next slide, please. Nikki. So this is a description now of the Jews that were in Spain. Remember again, if you haven't seen those videos where we discussed the Catholic Inquisition, encourage you to go back into YouTube, MediaNet.tv, where I go into this into some detail. Can you see that, Mr. C, to read?
So some historians have noted that the presence of Sephardi Jews in Portuguese West Africa by researching records from the Portuguese Inquisition relating to the New World. These show that there was a significant Sephardic presence in Angola and Guinea trading posts, and that the Portuguese settlements were crucial in the development of the crypto-Jewish diaspora, within the Atlantic region, I'm guessing.
Right.
Because
Good. No, you got it. You got it. Good. You got it. Good. So this is talking one branch of Jews called Sephardi. So when you see that word Sephardi, what you really are talking about are Jews of Spain and Portugal who lived on the Iberian Peninsula, right, during the times of the Moors, and then when the Reconquista took place, after the Catholics took it over, they were still there, but then they were eventually expelled. So they went over into Africa, into Portuguese colonies that were already in West Africa. Next slide. Here is a map of the Iberian Peninsula. And if you look to the bottom of the map, what you're looking at there is the African continent. And that little gap between Iberia and the continent is the Straits of Gibraltar. So many of those Jews who were forced to become Catholics and did not want to be, fled over the Straits, fled into Africa, but many of the places they went to were Portuguese territories, where the Portuguese were very, very influential. So what do we have there? Next slide. So if we've been talking about these people are black, as we have been, the obvious question is, who are these people? Right? Why are we asking this question? Because nobody can doubt that these people are the modern day Jews. Right? It's a fact that can't be denied. So where do they come from? Because if one set of Jews, according to the history that we've seen in the Middle Ages in Iberia, were black, then this needs an explanation, does it not?
Sure does.
So let's look in a little bit of detail about their history. But first of all, let's just have an overview of what Jews are really all about. Next slide. Right. So here it says, historically, European Jews have been classified as belonging to two major groups. Right? So there's two major groups of the Jews. One are known as Ashkenazim, which are the ones that you normally see in Golders Green or Stamford Hill, right? All in black. And the Sephardim, or Hispanics, right? That we were just talking about. They're the two main branches of Jewish people. Now there are other branches, but these are the two main ones, the most numerical. Next slide.
Another area in Africa you have something big happening is in Nigeria. You have the Igbo people, or Igbo, pronounced either way. There's 40 million of them. There's been books written about it from scholars in Nigeria and scholars from the Jewish people. And where it gets interesting is, in America, there was a slave trade. And a lot of the slaves, a very high percentage of them, came from Western Nigerian ports. And in America today, you see a very large movement of African Americans who say that they're the real chosen people, that they're the children of Israel, they're the Judeans. You know, so what are they just trying to create an identity for themselves because they were slaves, or is there really something here? And the answer is, most likely there is something there. And most likely, maybe that they were the original Israelites, and maybe that the Jewish people today, who are white, Caucasian people, came in a little bit later on.
I want to discuss a little bit.
So notice the rabbi says and admits that the original Israelites were black and are the descendants of those who were taken in the transatlantic slave trade. But he also mentions another group. He says white, Caucasian, and they came later on, right? They came later on. So the question is, how did they come later on? What is that history? So I'm not going to explain it to you. Let's have a prominent rabbi and historian tell you that history. Next slide.
Okay, today's topic is really bizarre. It's one of the most unusual chapters in this long history of the Jewish people. It's the story of the massive 8th century conversion of entire kingdom, Khazaria, to Judaism. Wow. So why did they become Jewish? What happened to them? You know, it's a really an amazing story. If you look at this first slide here, you see the green area is roughly the range of Khazarian influence. It's a massive region. In the area of what would be called, let's say, Ukraine, a good chunk of Russia, the Caucasus mountain regions, Georgia, Azerbaijan, places like that. And this region was Jewish for about 500 years. Wow, how did that happen? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's look at it in a little more detail. So first of all, perhaps you have come across the story of the Khazars through this book, the Sefer HaKuzari, written by the great Spanish Jewish poet Yehuda Halevi. This is a 12th century work that is quite a bit later than the actual conversion of the Khazars, which is dated to the year 740. But it essentially tells the story of why this King Bulan of Khazaria converted to Judaism. Now, what's really important to understand about this, though, is that Rabbi Yehuda Halevi was not trying to write a history book. This is a work of Jewish philosophy. If you want, it's a work of comparative religion. It's not intended to be an accurate historical account of the conversion. The story goes like this, as presented in the Kuzari, but basically it's, you know, in brief, it really is what happened. This King Bulan, a pagan living in his capital of Itil, which is on the northern part of the Caspian Sea, he wonders about, you know, what is religious verity, and he decides he's going to hear from all of the great monotheistic faiths. He feels like it's time for himself and his people to move on from paganism, and clearly monotheism is a burgeoning trend, and therefore he says, okay, let's find out about, you know, what's going on with the monotheistic faiths. He calls for a debate between the 3 great Western faiths, that is Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And he has all of the figures discuss the historical elements of their faith. And ultimately, after he hears all of them, he decides that Judaism makes the most sense, and he converts himself, and his entire nation follows him into Judaism. That's the basic story as presented in the Kuzari. Now, why Rabbi Yehuda Halevi wrote it, and he could only write it really within the very special environment of Spain, which had large Muslim and Christian populations, was to give Jews an opportunity to defend their faith against the arguments of the other 2 great monotheistic faiths. And by couching it within a historical
Wow.
So, notice the story. Remember, I didn't say this.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say this. In the previous video, we saw the Jewish rabbi says, well, the original people of the Israelites were those who were taking the transatlantic slave trade, but perhaps the white Jews who came in afterwards, like me, you see, and this is the story of how they came in. So the rabbi says that there was a kingdom called Khazaria that converted en masse to Judaism. Who taught them Judaism? Would have been the original Jews, of course. They would have to.
Good question. Good answer.
Right? And it's interesting because when this first came out, I think it was in the late 70s or early 80s, in a book called The 13th Tribe by Arthur Kessler. Kessler was run out of town and ridiculed and was called a self-hating Jew for writing a book like that. Now, 30 years later, they're now admitting that this story is true.
Mm.
They're saying the story is true. There was a mass conversion of a group of people in southern Russia who were taught the ways and the practices of the Jews. Now, what's interesting now, we're going to watch another clip with him. Watch how he now he's now going to give the reason as to why people might be motivated in a negative way to dig into this story a little more. Right? Listen to the reasoning in this next video.
Still, we have lots of other questions like, wow, they became Jewish. I mean, what happened? Why did they become Jewish besides the geopolitical? How Jewish were they? How come we don't hear anything more about them? I mean, these are all really big questions. So let's look at those right now. So there's evidence from medieval travelers that, in fact, the level of their Jewish commitment was fairly thin. Travelers like Benjamin of Tudela, Pataki of Regensburg, talk about the Khazars, and they don't seem to have a lot to say about them. It doesn't seem to really excite their attention that there is this huge Khazar kingdom. Not to mention the Geonic responsa that has survived from Babylon, which is not so far from Khazaria. We don't have too much reference to the Khazars. They don't seem to be really on the radar of the rest of the Jewish world, so much so that we really only hear about them in the 10th century with Chasdai ibn Shaprut. There's some significant question that maybe they didn't practice very basic rituals like circumcision, and that's like one of the most fundamental Jewish rituals. As Jews become assimilated, it's one of the very last rituals to go. Perhaps they were Karaites. Perhaps they practiced a form of Jewish expression that denied the validity of the oral Torah. That's also a possibility. It's kind of lost in the dark. And it's very difficult for us to determine this from the archaeological record. If you see, for example, this coin from early Khazaria, it looks like a Jewish symbol, but the fact is the Star of David wasn't a Jewish symbol for many, many hundreds of years later. So it's hard to really understand what kind of Judaism they practiced. But the bottom line is they probably were not practicing full rabbinic Judaism as other peoples were. Many scholars feel that perhaps the reality of the Khazar environment was such that only the top layer of society, the royalty, for example, convert indigenous faiths, presumably Christianity eventually, and so on. Now, so what are the perhaps inappropriate scholarly motivations of people who want to argue for this? Some say that the reason why people produce this particular argument is because it undermines the Jewish claim to antiquity through the Middle East in particular. In other words, if Ashkenazic Jewry are really descended primarily from the Khazars, that means they are not ethnically related to the ancient Hebrews of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so on. And this would mean that they have less legitimacy, as the argument goes, to the land of Israel, and so on. That's perhaps the political motivation for this kind of argument, which is incidentally very much favored by white supremacists. Still, we have lots of other questions like.
Right. So notice now, after admitting the story is true, then he goes out of his way to minimize the level of Jewishness that this nation had. So maybe it was a top layer, maybe it was just a few people, and then suddenly that died out. And this is what you often find with certain groups of people, is that they put forward information as facts, and then sometime later, you get a new history, but the new history doesn't come with a full admission. It comes with partial admission because the proof, unfortunately, shows itself. So initially they started off when this story first broke, that no, we have nothing to do with Khazar. There was no such place. Now there is a place. We were there. You saw the coin, but those people weren't really Jews. They weren't really. They were just like surface level. And the only kind of people that are interested in this story are either politically motivated, right, or white nationalists. See the argument? But it gets even more interesting.
Wow.
Watch this concession now in this next video.
Show us more, Tony.
That's the perhaps the political motivation for this kind of argument, which is incidentally very much favored by white supremacists and other groups, not well supported by the scholarship, but nevertheless, one can see why they would want to argue this particular point. That being said, looking at the Jewish people as a whole, if you want to try and look at genetic background, it's clear that Jews are completely mixed in with whatever peoples they live with. If you look at the Jews of India, they look like the non-Jews of India. If you want to look at the Jews of Poland, they look like the non-Jews of Poland. The Jews of Ethiopia look like the non-Jews of Ethiopia, and so on. So it's really a specious argument. Judaism does not define itself by genetic origins. It is fundamentally a people who are defined by the Torah and faith. Nevertheless, let's go on past this. So what about the Khazar legacy? So besides the...
So listen to that. So now he goes on to say that wherever you go in the world, you've got Jews of different colors.
That look like people where they live.
Right. So in India, you've got Jews that look like Indians.
Mm-hmm.
In Africa, you got Jews like in China, you got Jews that look like Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and then he starts off his sentence by saying that if you want to know about the DNA, well, when we're talking about DNA, we're talking about lineage. Lineage, that is a single lineage. Not different nations of the world that accept Judaism and then say that they are Jews. And what's really interesting about it, you see, is that the Jews of Israel have set up themselves as being the World Federation of Jewry. What does that mean? That means that they decide who are Jews and who are not. So they were behind, for example, the mass exodus of the Ethiopians back in the early 80s, right? They gave their permission after recognizing that they were Jews. So they have the final say. But now you're looking at their historian and say, well, it's not about DNA. It's wherever you find them in the world, we're a mixture. We share the same faith. After having to concede that they were a nation of converts, they came from southern Russia, and they are found in every part of the world wherever people are in that world, there are Jews there, and they don't all look alike. So, theoretically, according to his definition, the Jews really are a multicultural hodgepodge of all different colors and races of the world.
Just want to pick up again for those of you who wanting to get the spelling of the gentleman's name for the book. His name is Arthur Koestler, Koestler, and the book is called The 13th Tribe. Sorry, Tony, continue, sir.
Okay. So let's just rewind a little bit. When Arthur Koestler first wrote that book, it was ridiculed worldwide by Jews around the world. It doesn't exist. There's no such place. Now there is such a place, but well, it wasn't quite. It was just the top layer, the elites, and then it kind of died out in the 13th century. Now it's well, wherever you go in the world and you see what the people are, they are Jews too.
It's always.
God.
I was going to say, it's always funny how places like that don't exist, but yet the Bermuda Triangle is real, Atlantis is real.
Now look, you can't knock the guy. The guy's got his interest. That's for him. It's his heritage. He's had that heritage run through his family for, over 1,000 years.
Yes, man.
You're not going to expect him to come and tell you outright what's what. You've got to pick the sense out of nonsense. And that's the key here. Now watch another Jewish scholar talk about the very same thing, and notice what he points out in this next slide.
It's fascinating is that as we look back historically, it seems that a certain number of Khazars did convert, and that they then were melded into the rest of the Jewish people. Conversion, just like Ruth converting, was always fine, but it was a small percentage, and that's it. That Ashkenazi Jews can ultimately trace back to a smaller number of families that directly trace back to the children of Israel. They were in exile.
So there we have again, you see. So this whole idea that basically Jewish people, wherever they went in the world, just brought everybody in from the various nations that they were in. This is despite the fact that the whole idea of Israelite people or Jewish people are bloodline.
Contradiction, isn't it?
Absolutely. But it has to be like that, because what's happened is, as you punch more holes in the story, they now have to give concession without actually admitting it, except for the very first rabbi we saw. As he pointed out, who the original Israelites were, and then they came in after. That is what their history says. That's what they're now admitting. Next slide. Can you read that headline, Mr. C?
I'll give it a try. Scientists reveal Jewish history's forgotten Turkish roots.
So this is an article that came out a few years ago in the Independent newspaper. Next slide.
We're related to Boris now.
I'll read that for you, right? Very quickly. It says, new research suggests that the majority of the world's modern Jewish population is descended mainly from people from ancient Turkey rather than predominantly from elsewhere in the Middle East. The new research suggests that most of the Jewish population of Northern and Eastern Europe, normally known as Ashkenazic Jews, are the descendants of Greeks, Iranians, and others who colonized what is now Northern Turkey more than 2,000 years ago and were then converted to Judaism, probably in the first few centuries AD, by Jews. That's the original black Jews. At that stage, the Persian Empire was home to the world's largest Jewish communities. This is an Independent.
Wow.
And this is DNA research done by a Jewish scientist.
Deep stuff, Tony, man.
So, if the DNA can't prove them, who does the DNA prove? Next slide. This is from another Jewish publication.
It says,
asking the very same question that we're talking about.
Are today's Jews genetically descended from the biblical Israelites?
Next slide. Now notice the way it's answered. I love it, because you see the same technique all the time comes out. Mr. C, can you see that?
Yeah. Even if the Khazars did indeed convert as people group in the 80s, even if the Khazars did indeed convert as a people group in the 18th century, the House of Israel has absorbed many from others in the past.
Stop. So notice the point, what they're saying. All right, so what? So they did. So they converted, but they absorbed. And we find the principle of absorption within the pages of the Bible. So remember, they first started off by saying this is total rubbish. There is no Khazaria. And we didn't convert. We are the originals from antiquity. We came from Egypt, where we were enslaved, and Moses was our leader. Now they're saying, well, yeah, we did, but even if we did, we're absorbed. We're like all over the world. Wherever we go, the peoples around us are the same as us.
Whereabouts exactly is Khazar? Are you coming that to later on?
It's southern Russia. It's
in Russia, yeah?
The Ukraine area. Next slide. Now, I'll read this one. This is going to tell you who are the DNA children of Israel, right? And this was scientific testing that was done a few years ago and has been confirmed. It says, the Lemba and you can look them up in Google, Lemba, you can Google them, a Bantu-speaking people of Southern Africa have a tradition that they were led out of Judea, that's in Israel, by a man named Buba. They practice circumcision, keep one day a week holy, and avoid eating pork and pig-like animals such as the hippopotamus. Several groups around the world practice Judaic rites or claim to be descendants of biblical tribes without having any ancestral Jewish connection. And there is no Buba in the records of Jewish history. So this is a tribe whose their oral history says that they came out of Jerusalem into the Arabian Peninsula, crossed over into Africa, and went down into Zimbabwe. You remember I was talking about Zimbabwe earlier when I mentioned the migration pattern. And they came to the attention of scientists in Europe and in America, and they were dismissed. The Jews had dismissed them. But what did they find? It says, but the remarkable thing about the Lemba tradition is that it may be exactly right. A team of geneticists has found that many Lemba men carry in their male chromosome a set of DNA sequences that is distinctive of the Kohanim. Who are the Kohanim? The Kohanim are the Jewish priests believed to be the descendants of Aaron. So they tested these black men who are mostly found in Zimbabwe and Southern Africa. And they found within their chromosomes, the Y chromosomes, which is passed down to from father to son throughout generations, they trace it back to the very first priest, Aaron, who is the brother of Moses.
Wow. Wow. That's direct lineage.
Now, just a quick point here. They're called a Bantu-speaking people. Right? So if you ever do any research on the Bantu migration, you will see that these are specific peoples who migrated into Africa. And the word Bantu, the original pronunciation is Abantu. Right? Untu means people.
Sorry, Untu?
Untu, NTU.
NTU means people.
Yeah, means people. And Abba means father. So the word Abantu means people of the father. I.e. the people of God. Next slide. So, if we want any further proof as to who the real Israelites are, having looked at the history of the Ashkenazi Jews, we looked at the Sephardic Jews, we can now look at the very Torah that the Jews treasure, the Torah being the first 5 books of the Bible. And notice there, it was foretold that these Israelites would go into captivity into a land they did not know for how long? 400 years. Next slide. How were they going to get there? How were they going to get to this land?
Ships.
It says, the Lord shall bring you into Egypt again with ships. So they were transported by ship. And it goes on to say that they were sold to their enemies as bondmen and bondwomen, that means slaves, right? And no man will rescue you. Now the word, you'll see the word buy in there, but that's a 1611 King James Version word, but it means rescue. Nobody will rescue you. You were going to be taken into slavery on ships for 400 years, and during that 400 years, nobody was going to help you. Which people on planet Earth have that history? Can the Jews of southern Russia or Ukraine claim a 400-year history of slavery where they were taken on ships? Next slide. Notice what was going to happen to these people that were enslaved once they got into those lands. Watch. It says foreigners in your towns.
Mm.
Go on, Mr. C.
Foreigners in your towns will become wealthy and powerful, while you become poor and powerless. You will be so short of money that you will have to borrow from those foreigners. They will be the leaders in the community, and you will be the followers.
So according to the very Torah that the Jews revere and have respect for, these are the writings of Moses. Moses said that when you were taken in slavery into these lands where you're going to go, you're going to be poor, and you are going to be the followers in the community.
Borrowing from the foreigners.
Borrowing from the foreigners. Is that the situation of the modern day Jews?
The Chinese in Jamaica, the whole of Europe and Africa. Yeah.
Right? It says that these foreigners will be leaders in the community. Are not the Jews leaders in the community? Don't they have a great amount of wealth that they've accumulated through business? They're not the poorest. They're not borrowing from foreigners. You are. Next slide.
Jarina Star says, stupid Moors brought them from the Caucasus Mountains to work as slaves. Then they disposed the Moors and took over the empire. So Moses said, as regards to disobedience, Deuteronomy chapter 28, Israel, if you don't obey the laws and teachings that the Lord your God is giving you, he will send these curses to chase, attack, and destroy you. Then everyone will look at you and your descendants and realize that the Lord has placed you under a curse.
So again, what does Moses say? Disobedience and breaking of the covenant would mean that these people in these foreign lands would face continuous hardship.
Yeah, consequences.
And so much so that other people looking at you will say that the Lord has placed you under a curse. And if this is your first time watching this video, then you can go back and look at some of the previous videos where I've gone into this in great detail, because this is absolutely true. We've spent a little bit of time just talking about the New Cross Fire, one of many issues that have plagued the black community. Not only in the UK, in America, wherever you go, in the Middle East, in India, these are the same. These are all the same people.
We've got Kush Films are saying the Lemba is waiting for you guys to get there. We have the actual documentary film, The Sons of Abraham. So that's Kush Films, ladies and gentlemen. Check them out as well. Thank you very much, Marlon Palmer there from Kush Films. We'll probably get you on, Marlon, to talk about that actual documentary as well. So we'll get that set up in the next couple of weeks. Rudy Liquid says this was written so as to justify slavery and take the minds of black people.
I would suggest, Rudy, that you perhaps look at some of the breakdown that I've put in there. You'll see it's a very different narrative to that. That is something that we do talk about a lot within the black community, but I have dealt with this extensively and shown how we've got to this situation. So if you have the time, I'll encourage you to have a look at those.
Yeah.
The point being here, though, right, that there are only one group of people who were taken away on ships to foreign lands for 400 years, persecuted, bottom of society. Moses wrote about those individuals. Next slide. Mr. C?
Continuation of Deuteronomy 28, verse 48 says, therefore in hunger and thirst, in nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies the Lord sends against you. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has destroyed.
Right. So again, this is the consequence, the warning that Moses gave to the people of Israel. So you're taken on ships to a foreign land for 400 years, abused. You were sold. Nobody came to rescue you. And you had iron yokes put upon your neck. Question: can the modern day Jews of today prove that history happened to them? Next slide. In fact, if you look at all these writings of Moses, look at the DNA history, look at all the anthropological evidence that we've provided, this is a fingerprint that only fits one finger. The question is, which finger?
The Ancient Black Hebrews, Abraham and His Family by Gert Muller. Hiding the Hebrews. Did America kidnap the lost tribes of Israel? Dante Fortson.
So, a lot to consume. You have a people who say they are the people, and the people who don't know they're the people. Ironic, isn't it? And the people who don't know they're the people have every question they've ever had about their situation answered by Moses in the very Torah that the modern day Jews revere. Every question you've ever wanted to know about why are we in this situation, why can't we get together, why are things so, why are we not united, why is our family structured the way it is all tied into this history. And isn't it ironic that the only history Black people tend to know about themselves are slaves? So I can only encourage you to do your own research. Don't listen to me. Do your own research. Use Google. Look at some of these books for yourself and get to understand the real history that you're not being taught.
Rudolph Bennett says, this was written from our Hebrew ancestors, and to say it was written or plagiarized from other nation is pretty foolish. This is what heathen would say to keep us dumb. George Williams says, can we go back little more before this religion? How old roughly is the African or whatever name of one chooses to be called by nation? How old roughly is the Caucasian nation?
George, you're going to have to come back on the show, brother. I'm going to cover that in future episodes. That's far too much of an answer to give you that right now. But there is an answer. There is an answer.
Yeah.
The point is that what we're trying to show here is that people who are claiming an identity, at best, is very questionable. And the people who are not claiming the identity has evidence that is so heavily in their favor that they themselves can't believe it. That is the supreme irony. And we read in one of the texts earlier on how the European explorers went to Africa and they found Jewish colonies on the African continent who were separate from the indigenous African people. And if you go back into further studies that we've discussed on this channel, You know that many of them were escapees who exited Portugal, but were then caught, and many of them were taken across the Atlantic as enslaved persons. So we'll stop it there. Plenty to think about until we speak again.
Absolutely riveting stuff once more, Tony. Thank you so much for that, man. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you for everybody who's joined in the discussion, the debate, the history lesson. Whether you've got opposing views or not, we welcome your conversations and your comments. Please remember to like, subscribe, and to share to What a Week live show right here on MediaNet Live TV, alongside myself and Tony Crossbody. Tony, any final comments you'd like to mention at all?
Well, they say knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is really power. And so while we're here to inform you, we would encourage you to do further research with your kids, your grandchildren. The implications of this history is far greater than you really even understand. Those of you who heard the show last week heard what we discussed about what's going on in America and its significance, and how this is going to impact you in the very distant, very soon future to come. So I'll encourage you to just move your studies forward and join us back here next week, where we're going to have more Black history discussions.
And as well, ladies and gentlemen, we please, it would be lovely for you to get your children involved in your research and also your discussion. You know, it may be something like an iTunes voucher. Set them a task. Can you find out who did or who said or whatever? Set them a little task. Let them go on Google and do the research and come back with the information for you, and give them a little reward. Don't tell them the full reasons why you're sending them for the information, and see and have a discussion with them. Do it that way, rather than saying, come, I'm going to teach you about Black history, because straight away they may be a little bit negative. So let's be creative with how we can get our children involved in the discussion and joining into the research as well, and offer them some kind of prizes or bribeses, as I like to call it, to encourage them to find out more about themselves and the journey that their people have been on. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been What a Week live show. Once again, thank you so much, Tony. Absolutely fantastic. I want to say big thank you to Kush Films. We're definitely, Marlon, I'll give you a call, probably not this evening, but probably tomorrow, to try and get you on one of our shows to discuss the film that you mentioned. But again, ladies and gentlemen, we want to dedicate this show to the 14 who died at the New Cross fire 40 years ago, and also our good friend Mikey Rennie, RMP, MJR. This has been What a Week, ladies and gentlemen. Take care of yourselves and of each other. God bless until we see you again next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Thank you.